Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now what I've got whizzing around in front of me today are the new plastic Totenkorps from Konflikt 47. World War II zombies, man they're grim. Now what I'm going to show you today is a little different than most other videos because having so many different uniforms in one video would be a little impractical. So what I'm going to do instead is concentrate on the things that are unique to either the zombies or which would be useful over all of them. So there's going to be a couple of dry brushes and some finishing touches, basically. So because there are videos for pretty much all these uniforms already, what I'm going to concentrate on is going to be this fella here, for example, with the funky armor, and as well the Neue Republik sort of grey uniform and camo that you'll see coming around in a second here. These are going to be pretty handy whether you're painting Totenkorps or any other German unit for Konflikt 47. So hopefully you'll find something interesting here. Anyhow, most of the paints for the grim bits are going to be listed in the description, so let's get started. So once all of your zombies are assembled, it's time to prime them, and the easiest thing to do here is just use a black. You can prime in something like Hyrax Brown from Colorforge, or Oak Brown maybe from the Army Painter. It's not going to matter too much, but black I figure we've probably all got it. It's nice and easy to use. What it means is that the first step is going to be to take some oak brown from the pot, or anything similar, a nice big brush, and we're just going to splatter this pretty generously over the whole fella. Any little bits that do get left behind, the tiniest bits of black in the recesses, don't worry, but you do want most of this chap to end up brown. Now the main purpose of this is to make it a little bit easier for our base coats to go over the top. And as well, it's going to give us a slightly different kind of visual texture to our shading, which will look different than if we'd just taken a wash and thrown that straight over the top. And now, pretty much like any infantry figure, we're going to start by painting the skin. Here, what I'm going to use is necrotic flesh, and I'm going to be using this without thinning it down. Now, the big trick here is, because I'm not thinning it, what I'm going to get is a funky kind of texture anywhere that I apply maybe a little bit too much of this, but if I don't have a huge amount of it on my brush at a time, like the reason why we tend to thin down our paints is because applying them too thickly will leave brush strokes visible on the paint job. But if you're not thinning down your paint and you're not applying it super thick, you're not going to get those brush strokes anyway. The idea here is that it will tend to cover ever so slightly better, or at least more quickly, by using it straight from the pot. Now, this does fly in the face of conventional wisdom, and it's not the right it's not the right option for everything. But for zombies, who, if we end up with a little bit of texture in our paint surface, it's only going to work for them, then all the better. Now, some areas you're going to find you will still need to come back and give this a second coat. The idea is that once you've applied a thick, kludgy splat of necrotic flesh, move away from it. Let it settle, let it dry, because if it sort of half dries, and you come back with your brush and you lift it up and you disturb it, you're just going to drag awful, chunky paint everywhere. So, pop it on, run away from it, and once it has dried, we can work on that second coat. Now, after a couple of coats of green, we've got our grimy zombie skin. Hooray! You'll see one or two tiny bits on the leg where there is a little bit of that brown still showing through or visible at the edge, and that's why that brown is so useful, because if that was just the primer, black, it would look a little unnatural, but brown actually suits our purposes. Now the box of Totenkorps is made up of a bunch of different uniforms, and as luck would have it, I've done almost all of these uniforms on video before. So what I want to show you on this fella here is kind of the crux of the entire method. What I have is dark Feldgrau, and I'm going to use this pretty quickly. The idea here is that if I end up leaving a little bit of the brown right at the edges between two areas of detail, so like around his pockets or up against the straps that he's wearing, that's going to work as another layer, essentially, of shading and depth to our miniature. So I'm going to deliberately leave a little bit of that brown at the edges of certain areas. If you don't worry, you sort of splurge over it. It will just look messy, and that's kind of ideal for what we're doing. So because this is going to change, this color is going to change according to whatever uniform you're using. If it is the Americans, I'll talk about them in a second. Basically, pick a dark version of uniform color first, and then we're going to go over it with a lighter version. And that's basically the core of the method for the zombies. We start with the darker uniform color, and now I'm going to go up to mid-Feldgrau, and this is basic layering. What I want to do is leave a little bit of the darker color, again, just at the edges of areas of detail, but the majority of it should be this lighter color. So, you see what we end up with is a real quick bit of shading, and because we're being I'm honestly being really rough with this, you'll see. I haven't even got a point on my brush as I'm painting here. The idea is that we end up with a slightly ragged edge to most of our areas of color, which for our Totenkorps is going to be perfect. So we're going to do all of the Feldgrau on the German guys. And then once you've finished with that color, if I flip them around, it's probably a better view of what I mean by leaving a little bit of the dark color visible. So we're quite messy here, to be honest, but it is really good practice for both brush control and basic layering. Once I finish with this, now what I'm going to do is the colors for all the other uniforms. So like I said, because I have done these on other videos, I'm basically going to skip over these. So I've started with Dusty Skull on the American jackets. I'm now going to go over it with Skeleton Bone, and so on for all the uniform colors. We're going to skip ahead to the fun zombie bits. Now, while I have finished most of the base colors on the other fellas, this chap here is an interesting opportunity to talk about something unique to Konflikt 47. So I'm going to start with Deep Grey, and as I'm doing this, I'm going to start babbling about the Green Vault, who are sort of the chief bad guys of the Axis. Now, because they've done away with the old Nazi regime and are basically big bad now, there's nothing stopping you from doing whatever you want with the camo patterns and uniforms and what have you of your German or your Italian or whatever troops. Which means, I think you can see that reflected in some of the paint jobs from the studio, where they aren't, some of the German uniforms aren't even wearing Feldgrau, they're wearing a grey, which works pretty well. There is also the Neue Republik Camo, which is this grey, reddish, and green touch, and that's what I'm going to try and replicate here. So starting from deep grey, I'm going to treat this exactly as I have all the other clothing so far, just bapping it on, leaving a little bit of the oak brown towards the edges or at the recesses. And then to layer them up, brighten things up a little bit, we're going to go to uniform grey. Now, it's worth pointing out, if you do want to save a bit of time, you want to paint these guys more quickly, what you could do is just to skip the base color for pretty much everything I've used and go straight to your mid-tone, the color that you actually want the uniform to be. I'm honestly spending more time on these guys than I think I do on my regular infantry, and in part, it's because I want them to look properly sinister when they hit the table. So I need to make sure, I think, that there's a little bit more to them, which helps with the storytelling. So those grimy, dark bits are as much part of the table dressing as any terrain or what have you would be as well. I thought it would be useful to have a comparison between our painstakingly layered up grey, and this is uniform grey just straight over the top of the brown. There's a visible difference, but it's really not very much. I really think you could speed through these much faster than what I'm doing by skipping that base color step. All the same, for the next stage of the camo, what I have here is Dryad Brown, and the Neue Republik camo tends to have these more natural shapes. So I'm going to make little blobby shapes and then blurb away from them a little bit, which sounds insane. Yeah, I'd love to see some more sort of full color stuff on the uniform and patterns of the axis as it exists in Conflikt 47, but for now, we're making it up. And that's fun too. Now, following most ideas for camo, I think you want about a third of those splotches to cover the grey, and that's going to work just fine. What I'm going to turn to now is the green, and I'm literally using the green called camouflage green here. I'm going to do the same thing, just splotches of it, and we want it to kind of cover some of the brown parts and some of the grey as well. So use it to overlap some areas. I think this might be a little bit lighter than what they actually used. It might be, I don't know, woodland camo that they used for their green instead. I'm not 100% certain, but once we shade this, it's going to dull down quite a bit. I think it's going to look closer to the camo that's on the product pages. And for the armor, we'll start from deep grey, same as we did with the clothing, but I'm not going to brighten this up with uniform grey. Now I've got some dryad brown again, and this time I want to start by drawing a straight line out towards the edge of the armor, kind of a triangular shape, and then fill it in. Now this kind of works for most surfaces. Let's just get them in shot there. As long as you're keeping your little jaggedy bits relatively straight. And anywhere that you're worried you've overdone it, I've gone back in there with a little bit of deep grey to basically delete that. Now, concentrating on more of the zombie bits, what I have is mulled berry. And this is going to be the base coat for the guts and what have you. This stuff is not strictly realistic, and I know that's a silly way of putting it. Actual guts, of course, they're a little bit greyish. But I don't want to paint wholly realistic walking corpses for my battlefield. I want rule of cool zombies. So mulled berry it is. Now, for little bits of intestine and guts in particular, what I'm going to use is a little bit of figgy pink. Now, this is extremely bright going on, but once we shade this in a little bit, it's going to look a little bit more realistic. It's going to look a bit proper. You don't have to go crazy with this, but using it to introduce a little bit of texture, like particularly to these dangling bits, it's a bit of fun and it will look cool. So, yeah. Now, once you're finished with all of the soft materials, now I realize that I have painted the armor on the German fella before, but not to worry. All the soft fabrics and the skin are now going to get a dry brush. This is grotesque green. And I don't want very much of it on the clothing. We just want our fellas to look like they have been underground, dusty, slightly rotted. And it's ideal if you have to go over the area a couple of times for that color to pick up, You don't just want to come in here with a really heavily loaded brush and splatter everything. As always, it's easier to apply more than it is to take off if you've applied a little too much. So take your time and build up the color. And you want to go over everything. So boots, skin, all of it. We want our fella to look gross. Yeah. Now I'm going to do this over all of the Totenkorps, so the American stuff as well. And we'll get a look at what that looks like once they've all had a quick dry brush. So just for a quick glance, that's what the dry brush is going to look like. It actually turned out a lot nicer on the armor than I thought it would, so I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm not going to mess around with that. So now what I'm going to do is hard equipment. So it's going to be things like helmets and the pack on the Firefly dude. So speaking of that pack, I kind of figured like once these guys have been killed, their pack's likely maybe not to run out of power, but I don't like the idea of them just running around still glowing. So I'm going to use, this is True Copper, and I'm going to paint this in a slightly brassy finish for kind of a deactivated finish to these coils. And I'm going to use the same color to base coat the metalwork on the back of the German armored chap as well. Now once you're satisfied with all your base colors, and you've done any bits to tidy up, you have to, and I would recommend don't bother with tidy up on most of these guys. What it's time to do is to wash them. Now here what I've mixed up is half and half strong skin shade and speed paint medium. You could use strong tone, but strong skin shade, you'll see, has a little bit of warmth to it, which is really, really handy over pretty much everything. And will give a bit of life, no pun intended, to the skin tones as well. So luckily we can just bucket this over everything. Don't let it pull too heavily, but you can apply this over the entire miniature and then move on to the next. So once I've done this fella, I'm going to do all of the others, and then I will find somewhere nice and warm for them to dry, even for about half an hour. Let's see what we end up with. And then once your varnish is dried, you're going to have something that looks like this. And to be perfectly honest, if you want to knock them out the table real quick, that's it. You don't have to do anything else extra. What I am going to do, though, is one or two tiny extra things, because I think it will look cool, and it makes more sense to do them after I have varnished these guys. So what I'm going to do is take them outside, hit them with a matte varnish. Now with that varnish, the surface on everything changes really quickly. It's just a much nicer finish. But there are one or two things that we do want to stay glossy, and one of them is going to be the blood effect that we use. Now this is True Blood. This one's from the Army Painter. And I'm going to load up my brush with just a little bit of this on the end here. Now this is, it's kind of a almost gluey, goopy red mix. And it is very easy to go overboard with. So what I'm going to do is, with a little bit of it on my brush, just dab at areas where I want fresh, slimy gore. Now, like I said, you can go overboard, but I'm going to go down his jacket a little to make it look like, you know, it's dripping down him. You don't want to completely cover the bits of kind of meatiness that you have exposed. Oh, they're gross. But areas, for example, where there's going to be a bone sticking out in his leg here, just jab in there with a little bit of this. Now, just because of the angle this guy's at, it's a little tricky to show you, but grab some fresh white, and you can paint this over the top of the blood and put in those bones. Ugh, grim. You can also use this to paint in like eyes and teeth or what have you. I'm going to use it to brighten up his bandage, but that's really up to you how far you want to take it at this point. I think these guys are going to look fine. So what I'm going to do is finish off any last minute little details, maybe a dot or two of white on the goggles here. Go ahead and pop the bases on them, and the recipe for that will be in the description. Let's get a look at what these fellas look like when they're all finished. And so there at last, our Totenkorps Horde is complete. And yeah, they're a lot of fun. They are seriously grim. You'll probably see this fella coming around now who is wearing a little more historically accurate uniform. He's got that helmet cover there and grey trousers too. I figure because there is a period of the war in which there are corpses being made before the green vault takes over and, you know, amalgamates the Axis into one power, you've got the option of, as well, of painting these guys in historically accurate uniforms. Whether or not the dead were ever raised as a military unit, I can't say with certainty. I highly doubt it, but it makes for an interesting opportunity and a modelling choice if you want to go that route. All the same, these guys are actually a lot of fun. There's one or two of them which are a little more gross than others, and the number of missing limbs is statistically relevant, let's say. So thanks goes out to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, which includes my gorgeous producers who are shown up on screen now. Thank you very much for your support, folks. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Blue Sky and Instagram are both linked down there too. So thank you for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.